coming on the air with a message from King Charles III to a skeptical United Kingdom as he joins the nation in mourning his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. His moving tribute as he lays out a plan for what he believes comes next, not just for the UK, but for his family. Part of that plan, giving Diana's title, the Princess of Wales, to William's wife, Kate. Plus, Tropical Storm Kay making landfall near California, bringing 60-mile-per-hour winds. How those gusts are giving new power to those dangerous wildfires across the state. And in tonight's original, we speak exclusively to the woman who oversees Homeland Security's fight against cyber attacks, what she's saying about these new threats to schools. Plus, a new warning about artificial sweeteners. One of the world's oldest medical journals now says they should not be considered a healthy and safe alternative to sugar. Our doctor's here to answer your questions. And Maryland's Francis Tiafoe looks to become the first American man to reach the finals of the U.S. Open in more than 15 years. A look ahead to his primetime matchup later in the show. Hey, I'm Gabe Gutierrez, in for Hallie. As the United Kingdom grieves the death of Queen Elizabeth II, her son, King Charles III, is making his pitch to a grieving public that he plans to keep calm and carry on his mother's legacy. In an 8-minute televised address broadcast across the world, Charles gave a heartfelt tribute to his mother, the woman who acted as a moral center for the UK for 70 years. His message summed up with gratitude.
Queen Elizabeth was a life well lived, a promise with destiny kept, and she is mourned most deeply in her passing. Thank you for your love and devotion to our family and to the family of nations you have served so diligently all these years.
Country joining the king in mourning his mother at a prayer service in London's St. Paul's Cathedral. Among the speakers, the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, who spoke with Charles today. Across the UK, stores are shut down and soccer matches suspended through the weekend as thousands gather at the royal residences to lay flowers and pay their respects. Not just here, but around the world, from Washington to Tokyo and Moscow. And as he mourns his mother, Charles is also using today to plot what comes next, starting with the future of his own family. Charles is bestowing new titles on his son and the heir to the throne, William, who will now be the Duke of Cornwall and Prince of Wales, both titles held by his father for 50 years. He did not bestow any new titles on his other son, Harry, instead choosing to wish he and his American wife, Meghan, well on their lives overseas. Charles also did not mention William and Harry's late mother, Diana, whose title, Princess of Wales, now goes to William's wife, Kate. But he did take a moment to speak about his second wife, Camilla, now the Queen Consort.
I know she will bring to the demands of her new role the steadfast devotion to duty on which I have come to rely so much.
This to our third takeaway, his mission forward, as Charles looks to balance what he calls Britain's tradition and values with the model his mother set forth, in his words, the fearless embrace of progress. Why? Because this is a nation that is deeply skeptical of his ability to rule. The latest YouGov polling shows 2/3 of Britons either think Charles will not be a good king or they're just ambivalent about his rule. Charles channeling his mother's pledge to the nation more than 70 years ago.
Wherever you may live in the United Kingdom or in the realms and territories across the world, and whatever may be your background or beliefs, I shall endeavor to serve you with loyalty, respect, and love, as I have throughout my life.
Tim Ewart will give us analysis in just a second, but first we want to begin with Matt Bradley, who's in London. And Matt, in many ways, King Charles was trying to maintain that stability after his mother's passing while also looking forward. So walk us through your takeaways from that speech.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I got to tell you, Gabe, I was actually surprised by sort of the amount of officialdom that we heard from the new king just today, describing those titles, his role with the charities and the foundations that he's been so active with, and how he's going to have to kind of be stepping back from some of those duties. We've already heard the king had said previously that his positions on certain political issues was relatively strong when you think about the fact that he's a royal who has no constitutional role. Normally they're not supposed to truly express their opinions, and his mother really almost never did. He has already mentioned that he's not going to be continuing to express his views, most notably on the environment and other ecological causes, which he's been somewhat outspoken on, really kind of ahead of his time on. He was quite prescient in coming out on some of those issues. So what we're hearing from this speech today, it's not something that's going to rock the boat. It wasn't so unexpected. It was interesting that he mentioned Harry and Meghan and wished them luck, considering how much scandal they've been heaping on the royal family. But look, you mentioned how he's not necessarily a popular ruler. The fact is, a lot of Britons rank him, and in terms of their preference among the royal family, rank him below some of the children who are in the royal family in terms of who they prefer. He's not a favorite. He's not necessarily a charismatic person or a charismatic politician, but he inherits a lofty title, an incredible legacy after the death of his mother, and it's one that he looks like he's determined to rise to that challenge, and that's what he was setting forth in this speech today.
Picking up on that point, you know, that YouGov poll that you mentioned showing just 34% of Britons who wanted to be king, 37% actually want his son William, and another third either don't care or want no one. So, you know, tell me a little bit more. What's the reaction been among anybody you've been speaking with there in London or across Britain with reaction to this speech when you look at those poll numbers there?
Well, look, I got to tell you, in all honesty, I haven't gotten much reaction from the speech because I've been standing right here the whole time. But I can tell you that we saw earlier today, before that speech, which was pre-recorded, we saw the enormous outpouring of good wishes for the new king as he arrived at Buckingham Palace, his new home. You know, we saw that woman reach out and kiss him on the cheek. We can't deny that this is a man who was not so well loved before. We got to remember that this is a man who spent more time waiting to ascend to the throne than any other monarch in British history. So, as you know, his mother was the longest reigning monarch. He was the longest waiting monarch. His life has been waiting. It has already been sullied by repeated scandals, including the memory of Princess Diana, who was so loved here, and this feeling among a lot of Britons that it was him, his mother, his family, who wronged Princess Diana in the end. And that's something that he's going to have to get past. But the fact is that his wife, now the Queen Consort, she's kind of been welcomed. You know, it's hard to say exactly how this is going to go because he's cloaked in such power, such history. That will probably help him along. The British people will accept him.
Yeah, and Matt, as you mentioned, waiting so long for that job. Briefly, before I let you go, what comes next in this highly choreographed series of steps after Queen Elizabeth's death?
Yeah, as you mentioned, highly choreographed, a lot of pomp in the next coming days, really more than a week. What we're going to see tomorrow is something really interesting. The king goes to the Accession Council, which is made up mostly of members of his Privy Council, along with some other officials. They will officially proclaim him king, which is interesting, of course, since he has been king since the moment his mother died. But this is going to be televised for the first time. This is another legacy of his mother that he's inheriting, a royal family that tries to reach out to the people. This looks like their own edition. Remember, it was the Queen whose coronation was first televised, the first ever. So this meeting with the Accession Council, that's going to be an interesting new wrinkle, a new look into the royal lives.
Matt Bradley, live for us in London. Matt, thank you. And now let's go to Tim Ewart. He's a royal commentator, and to bring us a little bit more analysis here. And let's talk a little bit about King Charles giving the title of Princess of Wales to William's wife, Kate, a title most commonly associated, of course, with his late wife, Diana. A royal source tells NBC News, quote, "The new Princess of Wales appreciates the history associated with this role, but will understandably want to look to the future as she creates her own path." So is there some sensitivity here in turning over that title, especially as we saw him make a concerted effort to legitimize Camilla as Queen Consort?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Kate is very, very concerned about being constantly compared to Diana. This started, obviously, when she first appeared on the scene. It was another fairy tale romance. Would this one last? Parallels were drawn between Charles and Diana. So she is very anxious that this doesn't give us, the media, another excuse to go back and draw comparisons. How does this Princess of Wales shape up against the previous Princess of Wales, and so forth? But the bestowing of these titles on William and Kate was inevitably going to happen. He is the heir to the throne. He will be the Prince of Wales. His sons will carry, and his daughter will carry, the titles Prince and Princesses of Wales as well. The important thing to remember with William is, and you've talked about a skeptical nation and Charles's lack of popularity. William and Kate are very popular at the moment. They've been helped by the unpopularity and the increasing unpopularity in this country of Harry and Meghan. So people have turned to William and Kate. Charles made it clear today that while he has to keep quiet now as the monarch on some of the issues on which he's been outspoken in the past, he will look to William to carry on that work for him. So William will be, if you like, the public face of a campaigning monarchy, a modernizing monarchy. Issues like the environment, issues like homelessness and poverty and the disadvantaged, all these things are close to King Charles's heart, and that's the role that William is going to take on.
And Tim, you brought up the unpopularity of Harry and Meghan, so let's zero in on that moment in the speech where he made sure to bring up Harry and Meghan very briefly. How much did you read into that?
Well, we know that Charles has been pained by the rift that's come to hit the family. I mean, there's no secret about that. William and Harry are at loggerheads. The Queen herself had always said that the family still loved Harry, still wanted him to be part of the family. So this was a very public olive branch to the couple. I think it was also intended to say to the public, hey, listen, just calm down, just give them a break, stop. And the social media that we have here against Harry and Meghan can be quite bewildering. So I think the part of this was an appeal to us, the public, to lay off, if you like. But it was interesting that he did make a reference to their continued life overseas, which did seem to draw a line under the possibility of them coming back to Britain and resuming any active role with the royal family here.
Tim Ewert, thanks so much for your analysis. We appreciate it. Now, President Biden today confirming to reporters that he will attend the Queen's funeral in the coming weeks. He's the last of 13 U.S. presidents the Queen met during her time on the throne. But today he was in battleground Ohio on a victory lap for his computer chips law less than 2 months before the November midterms. That law boosting domestic production of computer chips to help the U.S. stay competitive with China. But the tight Senate race in Ohio is also top of mind. Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan is facing Trump-backed J.D. Vance. And right now, Cook Political Report rates that race is leaning in Vance's favor. So why is this so important? Well, the winner of that seat could help determine the balance of power in the Senate. Joining me now is Monica Alba. And Monica, we'll begin with the White House's reaction to the Queen's death. How is the White House preparing for the president to attend the funeral? What's the protocol here?
Yeah, there are actually very lengthy protocols here, Gabe. As you can imagine, there will be a formal invitation, we understand, from the royal family to multiple heads of state who would attend the funeral. And then the White House will accept that and announce the travel. And all of that could come in the next couple of days. But today, the president did confirm he intends to go. He doesn't know all the details or how long his visit will be, but he does want to go in person to pay his respects. We saw him last night at the British Embassy with the First Lady, laying flowers, signing a guest book, expressing his condolences, and calling Her Majesty so much more than than a monarch. He said that she really defined an era. So we can expect to hear the president talk about that in the lead up to this trip, where we will see many world leaders who actually were supposed to be gathering in New York for the United Nations General Assembly around those dates. So they'll be juggling a lot of travel plans. There's going to be a lot of figuring out what flight leaves London at the right time to get to New York next week. So that's something we'll be watching for, of course, Gabe.
And Monica, the president has been out on the trail this month, first Pennsylvania, and today he took that victory lap on the computer chips law, focusing on manufacturing and infrastructure. Now, Ohio, always an important state, of course, but why more so now?
A battleground, of course, and one that really can be quite indicative of how things are going to be going in a general election. It's, of course, a place that candidates barnstorm all the time, but we're talking about the midterms here. And what's important to remember is that former President Trump did win Ohio in 2016 and in 2020, but today Joe Biden was there as president campaigning on this important manufacturing legislation, but also talking about Congressman Tim Ryan, who is running as a Democratic Senate candidate in Ohio, which, as you showed, is critical for potential control of the U.S. Senate. Here's a little more, though, of what President Biden said today just outside Columbus.
Folks, the future of the chip industry is going to be made in America. Made in America. Folks at home should know the manufacture of these semiconductors connects countless small businesses and manufacturers into a supply chain that's going to thrive, all because of this law.
So this was groundbreaking for an Intel facility. That's why the president was there, but you can't ignore the political backdrop. And when asked if Joe Biden should run again in 2024, Congressman Ryan said it's up to him. He hasn't said definitively whether he should. That's something to watch for, too, here, Gabe.
Monica Alba, live for us at the White House. Monica, thanks so much. And as Vice President Harris today going on the attack against the Supreme Court. In an exclusive interview with NBC's Chuck Todd, the vice president says that as someone who has been inspired by people like Thurgood Marshall and the work leading to Brown v. Board of Education, she is concerned about the court's integrity after it overturned Roe v. Wade.
How much confidence do you have in the Supreme Court?
I think this is an activist court.
What does that mean?
It means that we had an established right for almost half a century, which is the right of women to make decisions about their own body as an extension of what we have decided to be the privacy rights to which all people are entitled. And this court took that constitutional right away. And we are suffering as a nation because of it. That causes me great concern about the integrity of the court overall.
And you can catch more of Chuck's interview with Vice President Harris this Sunday on Meet the Press. The Justice Department and former President Trump's legal team has until midnight tonight to release a list of potential people who could be the special master that would look into the more than 11,000 documents taken from Mar-a-Lago. It comes as the DOJ has decided to appeal the judge's ruling for a special master. A judge is also giving former President Trump's team until Monday morning to respond to a second DOJ filing that asks the judge to revisit the part of her decision that temporarily blocks prosecutors from accessing about 100 classified documents taken from Mar-a-Lago. The DOJ says it prevents the government from determining whether U.S. national security had been compromised. Writing in the filing, quote, those aspects of the order will cause the most immediate and serious harms to the government and the public. Joining me now is Ken Delanian. And Ken, let's break down the DOJ's reasonings for both of these filings. First, what would the benefits be for the DOJ in appealing the special master's decision?
Well, Gabe, the DOJ wholeheartely disagrees with almost all of the judge's order, does not think a special master here is warranted whatsoever. But what they've done here is really interesting. They've really sort of made a targeted approach here to this judge in asking her to stay her own order. They're saying, look, among these 11,000 documents that we took at Mar-a-Lago, we're fine with a special master reviewing 10,900 of them. It's just the 100 classified documents that we don't think it's appropriate for a special master to review. And they make some really almost unassailable, according to legal experts, arguments about this. First of all, they say, look, these are manifestly the U.S. government's documents. They are not Donald Trump's documents. They have classification markings on them. They came from the CIA and other agencies. Secondly, there's no possible attorney-client privilege here. And lastly, they say, even if Donald Trump wanted to assert some executive privilege over some of these documents, which is hard to imagine what that could be, they say the government's interest in national security and a criminal investigation should overcome that privilege. And they say the public is suffering irreparable harm from this judge's order that they are not allowed to use these documents in the criminal investigation. They say that a damage assessment conducted by the intelligence community into, whether any sources and methods have been compromised by the mishandling of these classified documents, that's on hold because of the judge's order, because the DOJ says the FBI criminal investigation is sort of inextricably linked to the overall IC damage assessment. For example, they found all these empty envelopes marked with highly classified markings on them. The FBI, the DOJ says, needs to investigate to figure out what happened to those documents and whether national security was compromised by their mishandling. So that's the argument. We'll wait to see whether the judge agrees with it and stays her own ruling. If she doesn't, then the DOJ is going to ask the appeals court to do that, but that could take a little more time, Gabe.
So, Ken, what do you think are the chances that the DOJ gets what it wants here in these filings?
Well, legal experts I've spoken to think that the DOJ has a very strong hand here, because when the executive branch goes into court and says there's a national security concern, generally the courts defer to the executive branch because the courts don't have that expertise. That expertise lies with the national security agencies of the executive branch. So generally they win that. So with respect to these 100 classified documents, it's very easy to see a way that if the judge doesn't do it, the appeals court will do it rather quickly. And what else this tells us, Gabe, is that the Justice Department does not seem that concerned with the other documents that they seized from Donald Trump's office. The Trump side said there were tax records, health records, other kinds of things. It suggests there aren't any smoking guns in there that the DOJ feels compelled to use in their investigation. They're most concerned with these classified documents, Gabe.
Ken Delanian in Washington. Ken, thanks so much. And with the war in Ukraine far from over, call it a kind of new normal. How people in parts of the country away from the fighting are trying to move on with their lives. Plus, metaverse, janky, and yeet. You haven't seen those words in the dictionary before, but you will now. The other words Merriam-Webster is adding coming up. Turning now to the weather and a 1-2 punch. We've been hearing about the West Coast battling extreme heat for a while, and now Tropical Storm K is finally here. Check out this new video we're getting. This is Imperial County, and you can see some streets there are already flooded. And we're also seeing this video from another part of California, just north of San Diego. You can see downed trees as they also deal with rain, fog, and wind there. In San Diego, we're talking winds of 45 miles an hour, and it could reach 80 miles an hour in some areas in the mountains. Of course, temperatures on the West Coast are already high, and these high temperatures plus intense winds are now fueling wildfires. Millions of people from Northern California up through Washington State are under red flag warnings or an increased risk of fire danger. Steve Patterson joins me now from the West Coast. And Steve, we're seeing these intense winds from the tropical storm. So how much are those winds contributing to the wildfires being made so much worse over there?
Gabe, I think too often we see a lot of these fires. Maybe you're viewing it on TV, you see the flames, you point and say, that's the primary antagonist. That's what's burning structures. But it often, rarely, especially when you have fires this large burning across California like this, rarely is that the primary culprit. The wind truly is what is driving these fires, and this tropical wind only going to make it worse. When you're talking about 40 to 80 mile an hour winds coming over canyons into these fire zones, that means that aircraft can't fly. Remember, it only takes about 30 mile an hour winds or so to ground aircraft for that retardant that they drop that is so crucial on the front lines of so many of these to be wholly ineffective. That's the fear at this Fairview fire, now a monster fire in Riverside County, as well as the flash flood warnings that this brings. Inside these fire zones, you're dealing with a dual threat, a triple threat if you add the fact that there are burn scars all over the state, the torrential rain that comes increases the risk for mudslides. So you're dealing with multiple emergencies on multiple fronts. The good news is the rain is expected to really end the heat wave kind of all in one stroke, and some of these fire zones are going to get rain from this tropical storm. That will certainly make a difference, but it will do more harm than good, especially with the wind that is expected to come over.
Yeah, so the rain is good, the wind is not. Governor Newsom there has declared a state of emergency for some of the places threatened by, as you mentioned, the Fairview fire, but there's also the Mosquito fire, and that one's over 15,000 acres as well. So as these communities are getting this weather over the next couple of days, how prepared are they, though, for all that's to come?
Yeah, the Fairview fire started a little under, 2,000 acres or so a few days ago. Firefighters told us at worst, and this was to be somewhat of a disaster scenario, that it would get up to 7,000 acres. That fire is now 27,000 acres plus. It is burning on multiple fronts. It is burning exponentially every day this week. It grew another 4,000 acres since last night. Getting a handle on it has been so incredibly difficult, and we've said it, this tropical storm only set to make things worse. Firefighters are really doing all they can. They're alerting people about what's happening. But the problem is when you have winds that are this erratic, these eastwardly winds kind of swirling the fires. We've seen several fire tornadoes pop up in that area as well. It's very difficult to tell. And the spotting from the fires, in other words, where the embers jump from scene to scene, creating new spot fires, pushing the front of the fire to a different zone, it's very, very difficult, and it's only going to get worse unless, again, we get a significant amount of rain to really knock this out, but that's not expected. Gabe?
Steve Patterson in L.A. for us. Steve, thanks so much. And I want to bring in Bill Cairns now. Bill, let's start on the high temperatures because today's the last day of that historic western heat wave, right?
Yeah, we're right in the middle of it. San Diego's cooled off. A couple other spots have cooled off. But yes, today's the really big blockbuster day that will set record highs. The all-time like September highs or even all-time highs like Sacramento and San Jose did earlier this week. But look at downtown LA. I mean, it's 98 degrees right now, and this is the difference from when you have the tropical moisture over you and some rain showers. It's 78 in San Diego, but we're still very hot in Sacramento. Look at Red Bluff, about the hottest anywhere in the West right now, 108 degrees. And yesterday we were 99 in Denver. Mother Nature turned the AC on today at 61. So what are we going to expect? So we still have roughly about 28 million people under the heat warnings. These all expire later on this evening in the West Coast. And then as we go throughout, the day today, we're going to top out 110, 107, 106. But tomorrow into the weekend, we take the temperatures down. Not quite back to average, but at least close to it. Highs will be in the 90s instead. So that's a little bit better. And as far as that tropical storm goes, Kay is still spreading rain, mostly in Southern California. Some of that's trying to move up towards LA. We'll get most of that heavy rain, though, in the mountains, and that's where we already have these flash flood warnings. Flash flood watches go all the way up to Las Vegas with this storm system because this will stick around for 2 or 3 days, Gabe.
And, Bill, we're also seeing flood watches for the southeast, too. How's that looking into the weekend?
Yeah, this isn't tropical related. Typically this time of year we'd be tracking something tropical related. This is actually just a regular old storm that's located near New Orleans. You can see on the radar, anywhere there's yellow, there's downpours. So all over the place. We're mostly concerned with the low-lying areas from Savannah all the way up to Charleston. And then right near Tallahassee, called this the Big Bend area of Florida. That's where we're expecting the highest rainfall totals. Widespread 1 to 3. Isolated could get up to 10 inches of rain. So if that happens, we will get some flash flooding out of this. But we'll see how it develops as we go throughout the weekend. Highest totals, again, Savannah to Charleston at 3 inches, and then near that Big Bend, Gabe.
And, Bill, before I let you go, let's talk about that new research showing that rising sea levels are actually encroaching on private property in places like Louisiana. What's your takeaway from what we're seeing in this report?
Yeah, this was an interesting study. Typically, you hear in the news, a new study came out saying how high the sea levels are going to rise as we go throughout the next, say, 50 years, 100 years. Well, what's interesting in this study is they actually said, okay, the sea level is going to rise so far, and as it rises, people are going to lose property. And if people lose property, they will want to pay less taxes because the ocean is going to be up higher. So this actually went and calculated, they looked at all the people's property lines, where the ocean hits the beach, and different states have different criteria for where that line is. I don't know this. I don't own property at the beach. So this was a brand new information study to me. And they actually went county by county in all the states and show which properties in which states are going to lose the most money. And Florida was #1 with 140,000 properties that are on the beaches that'll have to be reassessed, and areas like Louisiana had over 100,000. So this was just a different angle, Gabe, on what is going to happen. There'll be a lot less tax revenue.
Wow, a lot to chew on there, Bill. Thanks so much. Now let's get over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. #1, Clark County official Robert Tellis has been arrested after his DNA was found at the murder scene of a prominent Las Vegas investigative journalist. Jeff German was found stabbed to death outside his home on Saturday. Detectives say the politician accused of murder publicly expressed his anger at German and his reporting. #2, Los Angeles health officials are investigating the death of a person who had monkeypox. It's the second known death in the U.S. Someone who had monkeypox also died in Texas. Monkeypox is rarely fatal, but people with weak immune systems are at higher risk of severe disease. #3, BYU dropping a ban on a fan who had allegedly used racial slurs at a match against Duke University. BYU says it reached out to more than 50 eyewitnesses and did an extensive review of video and audio from the match, but they did not find any evidence that the fan used racial slurs. Duke responded to the statement saying it stands by its players and does not tolerate hate or bias. #4, baseball will have a new set of rules for 2023. Some of those rules include a pitch clock, meaning the pitcher has 15 seconds to throw the ball when no one's on base and 20 seconds when someone is on base. Also, bigger bases and a shift ban. Votes on the new rules were not unanimous. Some players opposed a pitch clock and shift ban, but were overruled by the league. #5, you will soon find pumpkin spice and yeet in your dictionaries after Merriam-Webster added 370 new words and phrases. Also new to the dictionary, metaverse, janky, and sus. Learn something new every day. That's a little sus, that story is anyway. A health warning, raising new alarms now about the alternatives to sugar that many of us have every day. What you need to know about the new study on artificial sweeteners and whether there's a better option out there. Stay with us. We turn now overseas, where Ukrainian forces have regained ground in the Kharkiv region. President Zelensky says that troops have liberated nearly 400 square miles after more than 6 months of Russian occupation. Also, United Nations monitors say a safe zone around the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant needs to be established immediately to prevent a nuclear accident. The plant, which first came under Russian attack in March, has repeatedly been hit by shelling. Ukrainian engineers at the plant are using a precarious stopgap measure, relying on one active reactor to run the nation's critical safety and cooling systems. And as the war grinds on, Ukrainians are trying to forge a new normal, saying they simply can't hide in bunkers forever. NBC's Josh Letterman has their story.
Black clouds separated. Saturday in Kyiv, and for a few hours, music blaring, alcohol flowing, people dancing. You could almost forget there's a war.
Before the war, the nightclub didn't even open until 11 o'clock, but there is martial law right now and a military-imposed curfew, and so now Ukrainians are partying in the middle of the day.
Garrick Pledov has been DJing for hours in the daytime, packing in the fun long before the 11 p.m. curfew shuts the city down.
Inside of these people are like big hole, and after this they feel again their lives.
It's a far different scene in Ukraine's east and south, where fierce fighting has erased nearly every sign of normal life. Across Ukraine, some 12 million people have fled their homes, and nearly 14,000 civilians have been killed so far, according to the United Nations. But in parts of Ukraine where the Russians retreated months ago, nightlife, tourism, and bits of normalcy are starting to come back. Like COVID. Easy to overlook in a war zone, but not at this vaccination site. This man getting a booster says during war, people forget there's still a virus spreading, so better to be safe. At a Georgian restaurant near Maidan Square, entertainment was canceled when the war started. Tonight, for the first time, it's back.
They want to eat and have some performance, not just to read bad news. They want something bright.
In most of Ukraine, air raid sirens still go off almost daily. By now, most people ignore them and go about their day. This year, the IMF says Ukraine's economy is expected to shrink by more than a third. But the government says it's starting to stabilize and could expand by 15% by next year. Most tourists are still staying away. At Odessa's beachside Hotel Nemo, 80% of rooms are empty.
Economically, it's totally a disaster time for us. It's more political now. We want to show how we stay strong.
The sun is out and the pools are open. But before the war, the party would have been right here on the beach. These days, landmines make the beach off limits. Alexander Cohen and his wife Hannah have started bringing their baby once a week to this pool just next door to the Odessa port, which was recently struck by Russian missiles.
After a while, you kind of realize that you really have no control over anything. You think that you're safe in the bomb shelter, but, you know, how safe is it? After a while, you realize that there's just no way for you to take all the risk out of life, and I think everyone just adjusts. Can't be scared all your life, but then you're just not living anymore.
One more sign that parts of normal life are coming back in Ukraine. McDonald's, which is hugely popular here, closed all its restaurants at the start of the war. Now, the company says it will start reopening some of its locations, beginning in western Ukraine and here in Kyiv. Back to you.
Josh Letterman, thank you. Now, coming up, a Hallie Jackson Now exclusive interview with the top government official in the fight against cybercrime. Why students' information has become so vulnerable to cyber attacks and what school administrators are doing to make sure the data stays safe. Plus, honoring the life of a Memphis woman who was abducted a week ago today during an early morning run. How thousands of people showed up to remember Eliza Fletcher and take a stand against violence toward women. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're hearing more warnings about how artificial sweeteners can be harmful to your health. A new study is additional evidence linking aspartame and sucralose to increased risk of stroke, high blood sugar, and heart disease. The report, published in one of the world's oldest medical journals, states artificial sweeteners, quote, should not be considered a healthy and safe alternative to sugar. And they're harmful in small doses. Just 77 milligrams of aspartame, or 2 packets a day, can cause elevated risk of stroke. And as I mentioned, this stuff is everywhere. Aspartame is found in sweeteners like Equal and NutraSweet, also in cereals, yogurt, candy, and diet soda. Sucralose found in Splenda, baked goods, ice cream, canned fruit, flavored yogurt, and syrups. So we want to bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar. And doctor, we've been hearing for years that artificial sweeteners are bad for us. So what are the alternatives and what's the answers? Is anything okay?
Well, you know, what's interesting about this, Gabe, is that I think people who are sort of purists would hear that and say, see, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And, you know, I kind of agree with that in some ways, but the answer isn't necessarily, well, I'm just going to go back to regular sugar, because sugar, as we know, causes a lot of problems too. Insulin resistance and diabetes, which leads to heart disease and everything like that. In fact, according to the American Heart Association, women are supposed to have 6 teaspoons a day. Men are allowed to have 9 teaspoons a day. Most of us have about 17 a day. So way, way over that. Is there a healthier alternative? Well, according to the Mayo Clinic, yes, there can be some healthier alternatives. I think we have a list for our viewers. You can think about doing fruit juices or nectars, honey, molasses, maple syrup. The benefit benefit here, and I want to be very, very clear about this, is that in addition to having a lot of sugar, which they do, they also do have some vitamins and minerals, so some nutritional value. They have a lower glycemic index. They have some anti-inflammatory, antioxidant properties. So what I'm trying to say is that in addition to your sugar that you're getting with those natural sweeteners, you are getting a little bit of some nutritional value. So they shouldn't be sought after like this is a healthy thing to eat. But if you're going to use a sweetener, I would use something like that as opposed to just regular sugar.
Okay, so as for the sweeteners, the artificial sweeteners, are they actually sweeter than natural sugar, or are they at all addictive?
The artificial sweeteners?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Or the substitutes?
Oh, excuse me. Yes, the substitutes.
Yeah, no, so the artificial, I mean, the substitutes, right. No, I think insofar as the maple syrup and the molasses and everything has regular sugar in it, it's going to feel just as addictive. But absolutely, the artificial sweeteners, I'm sure you know folks who drink, tons of Diet Coke a day. Yeah, you do get addicted to that sweet taste. And people are absolutely exceeding what's considered a healthy amount, if there even is a healthy amount. You said yourself, 77 milligrams a day. It's not a lot.
And doctor, these sweeteners show up often in foods we might not expect. So should there be a better labeling protocol beyond just the ingredients list?
I think so. I mean, I think, when we talk about, let's say that, that I would be allowed to have 6 teaspoons of sugar a day, and I think I put like half a teaspoon of sugar in my coffee, but am I counting the tomato sauce and any other kinds of processed foods, things like that? If you're not looking for it and it's not really, right there on the label, that's probably where most of us are getting all of our added sugar, in places that, are kind of hidden and we don't really see. So unless you really make a concerted effort to, investigate that yourself, I think it's kind of hard to figure out. And so, yes, I do think that labeling would help. I think it'll move the needle a little bit. I think that folks who are just, kind of, eat what they want and don't think about the nutritional value of the things they eat, it may not make a big difference. But I think, slowly but surely, some small change will probably happen.
Dr. Hallie Azar, thank you so much. Now, turning now to the local. NBC covers hundreds of stories each day because you couldn't possibly read, watch, or listen to them all. Our bureau teams have done it for you, and this is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call, again, The Local. From our Northeast Bureau, New York Governor Kathy Hochul is declaring a state of emergency over polio. Just one case has been confirmed in an unvaccinated man who was diagnosed with a serious case, or paralytic polio. Experts say one case like this is usually a sign of hundreds more infections. Also from our Northeast Bureau, Princeton University says it will cover the cost of students whose families earn below $100,000 a year. A new financial aid policy will apply to students entering the fall 2023 class. It will cover room and board, plus students will be given a $4,050 each school year for books and personal expenses. Now, from our Southeast Bureau, more than 2,000 people showed up Friday morning to honor the Memphis mom and teacher who was killed last week. Eliza Fletcher was kidnapped while on her 10-mile run at 4 a.m. Runners showed up today, exactly a week from when it happened, at the same time to finish the run in her honor. And now we want to bring you today's original with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been keeping an eye on. A new alert from the FBI and Homeland Security comes as schools are back in session. Cyber attacks are now targeting the data of teachers, staff, and even students. The hackers are learning to make money off the information. Los Angeles has already been hit, and there are concerns it could happen to more school systems around the country. In a Hallie Jackson Now exclusive, Tom Winter talked to the top government official in the fight against cybercrime.
The nation's second largest school system under attack.
We were, in fact, witnessing a significant cyber event.
Students and teachers having to reset their passwords. It's part of an increasing trend, not just in Los Angeles, but across the country. It has the U.S.'s top cybersecurity chief, CIS's Jen Easterly, concerned.
As we've seen over the past several years, the education sector, and especially K through 12, institutions have in fact been a frequent target of ransomware attacks.
Now, an alert from the Department of Homeland Security and FBI about the threat just as kids head back to class. It says schools, quote, may be seen as particularly lucrative targets due to the amount of sensitive student data accessible through school systems. The alert focused on a group called Vice Society, who officials say are trying to target schools through ransomware attacks aimed at gaining access to birth dates, names, and other sensitive information.
Well, we mentioned in our advisory that we are actually worried about more attacks in the coming school year because ransomware groups perceive that there's an opportunity for these successful attacks. So school districts, many of them have limited cybersecurity capabilities and constrained resources.
The LA School District has yet to publicly name the group responsible for their breach. Superintendent Alberto Carvalho says they're continuing to uncover more and more about what happened.
This entity is foreign. It is not within the U.S. This entity did touch some level of student management system information. We do not believe that that information includes social security numbers or health information, but we're still investigating the level and the depth.
Experts say it's all about the money for hackers. Their business plan, built on ransomware, they infiltrate systems in order to steal data, lock up the machines, or both, then attempt to force victims to pay money to get their own data and computers back.
These organizations have payroll, they have HR. When I was in the Department of Defense, we used to track some of these groups when they went on holiday and vacations. So they operate very much like a business.
Brian Hoagley, CEO of the cybersecurity firm Side Channel, says the challenge for parents is what to do when your kid's digital identity has been stolen.
My kid will inherit this problem and now have to figure this out in 10 years, and they might go for their first car loan or apply for financial aid. And now suddenly, hey, you have all this credit debt. And they're sitting there going, where did that come from?
Easterly, a mom herself, says she knows how important her mission is.
We want our students to be able to go to school, to learn, to be safe, to secure. We want all of our data to be safe.
And Tom Winter joins us now. And Tom, I remember hearing a couple years ago that small municipalities were being targeted by hackers. Is this the next phase of that?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like every day we would hear about a small police department or a fire department that got hit. Yes, I think they are starting to move on to schools for some of the reasons that we talked about in the story, which is the idea that schools don't have the same type of resources. And DHS is hoping that schools start to pay attention like big companies do to these alerts that they're putting out and telling parents and educators to go to stopransomware.gov.
And Tom, quickly, what's the latest in the investigation into the LA hack?
Right. So that group that we mentioned in there today took credit for it, but still they haven't attributed it directly to that group. The investigation remains ongoing.
Tom Winter, thanks so much for joining us. Yep. Appreciate it. He was a long shot in the U.S. Open, who's playing tonight to get into the finals. Now, Frances Tiafoe swept past the competition to go further than any American male player has gone in decades. That story next. So in the next couple of hours, 24-year-old Frances Tiafoe will get his shot to become the first American man to compete in a U.S. Open final in nearly 2 decades. And to do so, Tiafoe, the 22nd seed in the tournament, will face one of his toughest challenges yet. His opponent tonight is 19-year-old Carlos Alcaraz. The Spanish phenom has shot onto the scene and is seeded 3rd at the Open. The women's side also has plenty of excitement. Tomorrow's final, matches the world #1, 2-time French Open champ Iga Swiatek of Poland, and she goes up against Ons Jabeur, the Tunisian native, who's now the first American woman from Africa and the first Arab woman ever to make a Grand Slam final. Now, ATP and WTA announcer Andrew Kraskny joins me now. And Andrew, let's start on the men's side, where all the attention is on Tiafoe. And what's so incredible here is that we're talking about a guy who has a career losing record. Now, given the dominance of Federer and Nadal over the last 2 decades, put this run into context.
Well, first of all, Gabe, hey, it's not a fluke at all. You take a look at Frances Tiafoe. He made it to the quarterfinals at the Australian Open a couple of years ago. his biggest foe has actually been himself. He has not felt that he belongs at the top echelon of the game. And I think now at this year's U.S. Open, with big wins against Marcos Giron, Andre Rublev, Diego Schwartzman, he has now proven to himself that he does belong there. And we're seeing a very confident Francis. And I think that Francis could actually do well tonight. They've only played once before. He played Carlos Alcaraz in 2021 on clay and won that match. So when you take a look on paper, Francis has an edge, although I think Carlos Alcaraz has shown us at 19 years old that he is the real deal, and he's going to be a tough one to get through tonight.
Yeah, and picking up on that, you know, Alcaraz is arguably the face of the changing guard in the sport. Tell me more about him.
Well, listen, Carlos is the real deal, and I think we've been talking about this changing in the guard for the last couple of years, but we haven't really tangibly been able to discuss it honestly, because there still has been Rafa, Roger, Novak. They all can still come back, but we're seeing the fact that these young kids are making their mark. We're seeing the next generation really come to life. Carlos Alcaraz is a fighter. The match the other night against Jannik Sinner has to be by far one of the best U.S. Open matches we've ever seen. It was a quarterfinal that's going to go down in the history books. Carlos is the real deal. He's only 19, but he is fallible. There is a possibility that this U.S. Open crowd, this New York crowd who's going to favor Francis, could pull Francis through.
And, you know, there's also this changing of the guard on the women's side, too, led by Swiatek, who could really cement herself as the woman to beat in the sport right now, right?
Well, Iga Swiatek has won 2 French Opens. She's #1 in the world. She had an incredible record at the beginning of the year through the Sunshine Swing, but she allowed those numbers to possibly get to her. And we've seen a little bit of a break in her stamina, and she's had some trouble holding serve the last couple of matches. And the fact that she's taking on a player, Ons Jabeur, the most successful Arab player in the history of the WTA, she's very hungry. Ons made it to the finals at Wimbledon and was very, very shaken that she didn't take home that beautiful trophy. So Ons Jabeur has, they've played 4 times. It's even, 2 apiece. They've each beaten each other once on hard courts. So going into that final, we can't tell you who's going to win that match.
A lot to watch for. Andrew Krasny, thank you so much for joining us, and thank
you.
you for joining us as well. That's a wrap for this hour. I'm Gabe Gutierrez in for Hallie Jackson. Thanks so much again for watching. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.